Hey humans, welcome to this episode of Conversations on Crisis. Conversations on Crisis is about just that, crisis, whether you're facing one, in the middle of one, or just came through one. We as human beings are unique, but the crises that we face are not unique. Many people have faced the very same situations that you may find yourself dealing with. It's good to know that you're not alone sometimes, and that's really what we want to converse and talk and have dialogue around. The conversation is meant to uplift, educate, and encourage and inspire, which is in line with my personal mission statement, to encourage others to endure through challenges while inspiring them to live up to their fullest potential. You can find out more about me, Coach Nate, at my website, natebattle.com. There you will also be able to see my book and purchase a copy, Battle Endurance. And if you love the content that I create, shows like this, I invite you to support it at my Patreon page at patreon.com/Nate Battle. Today's show, Conversations on Crisis, is about race, a much needed discussion that needs to occur that we want to cover and talk about in a different format. We've all heard a number of ways that it's been discussed, but I want to look at different angles. It's a very important topic that is critical, top of mind, and affects us all in ways that we may or may not know. So I've got a panel that I want to introduce you to and dive in. Let's go have a chat. So as I mentioned, I'm Coach Nate here. I'm here with my co-host and brother from another mother, Ian, and a distinguished guest who I'm going to introduce in a moment. How are you this morning, Sir Ian?
I'm good. Thank you, Nate. We are enjoying another wonderful day in sunny South Florida. We managed to make it past what was supposed to be a hurricane, but it just turned out to be a little bit of rain that we needed. And God bless the people that are on the East Coast as the storm heads north. It is doing some damage, but we were lucky. And so I'm grateful.
Yeah, we were very fortunate. We got maybe a windstorm, if that. Today's topic is going to be on the topic of race, and lots of things can go into that. It can be discrimination, prejudice, bigotry, bias, offshoots of that, misogyny, and the list is endless. But there's so much built into that word, racism. It is not going to be a complaint session. Not intending to speak to the same old narratives that are out there. It's really about talking about things that are different perspectives, to help educate, to help inspire, and to help challenge perhaps some of the thinking that some of us have around this from varying perspectives of my distinguished panel. And hopefully you'll come away with a nugget or two of a different viewpoint. Now, if you are set in your ways and you're decidedly against unity, this is not a show for you. We live in the United States. The race in the world, according to Nate, that is most important is the human race. And that really means equality. If one of us loses, we all lose. And really, that's the dialogue. We want to progress things in that direction. On the panel, I have Sharifa Hardy, host of multiple talk shows. Ask Sharifa. I refer to her as a talk show host maven. I have Chandra Gore, publicist and principal consultant at Chandra Gore Consulting. Sarah Selznick, co-founder of Thrive Delray, and Ryan Boylston, vice mayor of City of Delray Beach and owner of Two Ton. Good afternoon, welcome, and thank you all for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely. So we're going to dive right in. And I'm going to put this out to the panel, whoever wants to answer it. What has been your unique experience with racism that viewers may not have heard of, that may not have been discussed? Don't all talk at once.
Well, I can say that growing up in the South, I experienced it as a kid, and even in school. Like, my first experience was at school. So to have a teacher actually tell me not to speak because you're not let the others speak and then you can talk. And it was like I was in a classroom. I was the only Black child in the class, and it made me feel some type of way because I didn't understand why. But it was one of those situations. I do have another instance where I do voter registration, and the cops are called on me in a neighborhood with me, my 3 kids, and my dog. So I've experienced it on multiple levels. So I mean, I didn't know 3 kids and a dog was threatening to register to vote. I don't know, but hey, those are my experience. Those are the ones that stand out the most to me.
Interesting. 3 kids and a dog, voter registration.
I had a clipboard too. That's it.
And a clipboard.
It was, yeah, never mind. Oh, the joys of being Black. That's all I got.
Arifa, I know you got an example that.
I mean, I don't have a funny little example like
Mm.
Chandra out with the dog, the kids, and the clipboard. For me, I have never really experienced overt racism. What I've seen in my life is situations where I have been in meetings and board meetings, and I will make a comment or I'll make a suggestion and no one hears me. The white man sitting to my right makes a comment and a solution, which is exactly the same solution that I provided. And everyone is like, what a wonderful idea. That's a great thing. And it's being a woman, being African American, people tend to view us differently than our counterparts in work. So that's been my experience in corporate America, building my own companies. I launched my first website in 1994. So this has been over a 25-year journey in the business world. And what I have found is that I haven't been taken as serious as other people have been.
You raise an interesting point when you speak about being female. Sarah, do you feel that we as a nation are more, tough question, racist or misogynistic?
I think I think racist for sure, and I think misogyny is built, is a offshoot of racism. I think racism is the kind of the bookends of all different discriminations, and it's kind of like how we've learned as a country how to interact with people that are different. And so I think they get uniquely intertwined in a very harmful way.
Interesting. The reason I pose that question is some have said, based on this last election 4 years ago, that we are more misogynistic than racist as a society. That was the reason for the outcome. Different points of view.
Well, I'll tell you that probably has a lot to do with the fact that, and I'll say this as the white male on the call, is because our nation is built by guys that look like me, right? White males that set a bunch of rules and put a bunch of policies in place to benefit us. So, to answer that question, I think it's exactly what Sarah said. It's about different than this, different than the people that look like this, right?
So do you feel that over the last 5 to 10 years, Ryan, that racism has gotten better or worse?
I have a lot of great conversations with Ian over the last 5 to 10 years that we've been friends. And he always reminds me that no matter how bad things are and some of the things that we're talking about, that it's better now than it's ever been for Black Americans. And he always reminds me that no matter what the challenges are, that it's better than it was the day before and it better was the day before that. So only looking at, what Ian's words, I would say that it's better. For me, 10 years ago, I was walking around in a racist world and wasn't picking up on it. I wasn't noticing when individuals of color or females of color in a conference would say something and the reaction to them. I wasn't picking up on that 10 years ago. So for me and for a lot of people, and thank you to, individuals that do podcasts like this and people that write books that I'm sure we'll reference today in this call, and people like Sarah Selznick and Ian Caven that I'm lucky to surround myself with. I no longer live in that world from 10 years ago. I am constantly seeing these things over and over and over again. So my world has gotten a lot more racist just because my lens has completely changed over the last 5 to 10 years.
That's a
And I
good.
hope a lot more other people feel that way. That's not a bad thing.
No, it's really about educating. Overt racism is easy to spot. It's easy to know when the cops are called on you. It's easy to know when somebody yells out. Growing up in the Midwest, hearing the N-word, having cars run through the grass, house egg, whatever things that would occur. Very, very easy to clearly to see. But microaggressions, and those are the things that are intentional or unintentional. And Sharif is what you experienced in the boardroom, just overlooking you. That falls in the arena of microaggressions. Why? Because some would say in that room, "Oh, you're just being sensitive." That is a massive flag of a microaggression.
And that's where you got to speak up on that. Like when they say, "Oh, you're being sensitive," so I said, "So my passion is sensitive." Like I have to go back and forth. Like I did have a regular job before I became a full-time entrepreneur, and so a lot of times I would be the one that would say something, and I would be in HR for lunch.
Perhaps not as diplomatic as I was.
I'm just like, because I have to be myself, and myself sometimes doesn't realize that I can't say certain things. But I'm not allowed. I wasn't allowed to because it's not PC. I'm supposed to be quiet and not say anything. But I'm not going to be dismissed. I'm not going to be. Listen, I'm not the one to do that. Like my father was so glad that I moved away from the South because he said somebody would have hurt me because of I stand up, I speak out, and I say things that normally we would be seen, not heard. And that's exactly what we're supposed to be. I wasn't that. I didn't get that genetic code, I guess. So I will say something. I will speak my mind. I will speak up for myself, even if I ended up in HR. I was assaulted at. The person was convicted of kidnapping because she blocked me from coming out of a room and she pushed me, but it was a white female. And because I was not going to tolerate anybody treating me any kind of way. You're not going to talk to me like I'm crazy, and you're not going to make me seem like I'm crazy if I speak up for myself.
Right.
So that turned into a criminal case. Like,
wow.
She went that far to where she put her hand, like she pushed me, and the judge was like, "I'm glad you called the police because they would have never believed me if there wasn't video and witness." Like, listen, I don't know if anybody else has gone through that, but to me, it's like that ingrained in some people that you are less than because of your skin color.
Absolutely. It's sad when a microaggression, when something it's generally verbal, turns into something physical, especially when African Americans are often referred to as emotional and willing to get into physical altercations. It's kind of
But Nate, I just want to point this out. One of the, Chandra and I have sat on many a panel together. We've sat on many shows together. Like I said, Chandra handles all of my PR. When you look at my social media, I'm everywhere doing everything on every podcast, talking about these issues. And that's because of Chandra. And out of all the people that I work with and all the networking that I do, her PR firm was the PR firm that understood my challenges as an African-American woman. So we always talk about the microaggressions, but what I don't want to do is minimize the microaggressions into something that is micro. It's very important because it is the systematic racism issues that still run through America that is the reason why we are in this situation right now. I'll talk about an experience where I ran for Long Beach City Council. And I was at a forum, and one of the other candidates, through her whole campaign and all of her collateral and all her marketing, all she talked about was the Cambodians. So on the panel, as candidates, you have an African-American man, you have an African-American female, you have a Hispanic female, you have a white male, and then you have a Cambodian female. So I was able to ask the Cambodian lady a question, and my question was this: why is it necessary in everything that you do to mention that you're a Cambodian? Long Beach, California is a melting pot. We have people of all races in Long Beach. That's one of the things that we are so proud of, that we welcome everyone. We support everyone. And so I asked her the question, why was that so necessary? Her response to me was, I'm proud of my heritage, just like you're proud to be a happy Black History Month. So it just so happened to be in February, but she said I was proud to be a happy Black History Month. And so the look that I gave her, the quote unquote attitude that I gave her, people of color, African American women came to me and they said, Sharifa, you made yourself look so racist, right? You made yourself look like an angry Black woman because you rolled your eyes and you did your head a certain way because of her comment. So no matter what this lady said to me, I was angry because I rolled my eyes because she didn't have the common courtesy, the common decency to even notice my race. Happy Black History Month is not a race of people, but typically in our society, we can minimize African American people and African American women, particularly because we can write them off as angry. So when I did my campaign video, and it's on the internet today if you want to Google Sharifa Hardy Long Beach City Council, and I tell people, some people know me as a business consultant. I've written 2 books. I have ebooks. I host 3 different talk shows. And yes, some people consider me an angry Black woman. But you know what? I believe more people should be angry about injustice. I believe more people should be angry about homelessness. I believe more people should be angry about the lack of jobs. So if you see me as angry, I'm okay with that. But just know I get shit done.
You raise a number of points, and I want to dig a little deeper. And we're kind of dancing around it, but microaggressions, let's start with there. Yes, it's kind of it is an understatement when you say micro meaning small, meaning it's not a cross burning, but that doesn't mean it doesn't have an impact. So if a micro is a grain of sand, if you bring a back end loader in and dig up an entire bucket and pour it on a person of grains of sand, it's going to cause damage. And so the point in microaggressions is it is perpetual, it is continual, it is often, and that's something I experienced after working in corporate America for 30 years. And I could resonate with the concept of our prior president, President Obama, and he could not afford to get angry.
Nope.
As a Black man, he could not afford to show his emotions for those very stereotypes. Let me take that a step further. If our current president were Black, he would never be in office, and we know this. Not with 3 wives, different kids,
Baby mamas.
with all that's going on. So that is wrong on so many different levels. Just if he had the exact same past, if he had the exact same accomplishments, if his skin color were different, and then so that is really what we're trying to get to. And Ryan, you touched on something about your eyes are more open, and rules were created around people that look like you. There's a lot of talk around white privilege, and people don't like that word, and I understand, because I heard a story in a training, and Sarah will be able to speak to this, where there was a homeless guy, and he slept in a homeless shelter, and he said, I can slick my hair back, grab a USA Today paper, and walk across the street to the hotel and help myself to breakfast, and nobody's going to say anything. But if I walk over to that hotel with my Black friend and stand outside, they're going to call the cops on us. So I'm homeless. I have a real hard time with the word white privilege, but I am willing to accept the term white advantage. So Ryan, to your point, if everything was created for and around, can we at least all agree that there is such a thing as white advantage?
Well, I think everyone on this call could, but I don't think that's what you meant by everybody, right?
Mhm.
So if there's a clear advantage, and Sarah and REI, the Racial Equity Institute, put it best when they say we have to accept it, we got to own it, we got to be proud of it, and then we got we have to want everyone else to have that same advantage. It's real easy.
I agree with Ryan, because to me it goes back to, because I get very, very frustrated, and the last thing they want is a frustrated, angry Black woman. But I get very frustrated with semantics. So to me, when you say advantage, privilege, better, whatever you want to call the word, it exists. So it's just semantics to play with the word. Let's take a look at the issues. Let's take a look at the facts. That's what we need to focus on. To me, it's not as important what you call it. I can tell you right now, if Sarah and I had the same exact resume and we went to apply for a job, no matter what our resume says, Sarah is going to be hired before Sharifa. It's just the way American is. We take a look at who that person is, who we believe them to be, and then we say, okay, well, who is going to fit best into the culture of this company? Now, Sharifa is going to bring her little angry Black attitude into our company and start changing things, whereas Sarah, we took a look at her bio, she's harmless. She'll come in, she'll be okay in the culture. Everybody can go to the country club and hang out. Everything is going to be fine. So again, it's semantics, what you call it. What we need to look at is the practices and the policies that we have if we want to make changes. Everything else is just words.
We should take that a step further. It's not even a matter, it's not that things are going to be fine necessarily. In the event that your resumes are identical, yes. But in the event that your resume far outshines Sarah's, yet she gets hired.
Well, first of all,
Then let me finish this point, then I'll let you chime in. If you're if you are correctly qualified and Sarah is underqualified, and they hire her, now the company is not going to perform at the level that it could. It's not going to make the money that it could. In other words, the point here, and there's data and statistics to back this up, that there is a predominant culture in place where underqualified applicants of the white race are being hired for positions over qualified Black applicants. The companies are performing less efficient and as effective as they can. In turn, it's costing them money. Then transcends, I believe the data went so far as it looked at the spectrum of life expectancy of the developed nations, and the US is near the bottom. And one of the reasons it is, this racism problem is an economic problem. And that's the education that needs to occur. It is not a matter of the simplistic, the attitudinal and those types of things. This systemic issue is costing all of us. It is shortening lifespans of if we are not the United States, then we are divided. If we're divided, it's hurting every one of us. Until that message resonates, until that message gets across, we're all going to suffer. My belief, and I know I asked you on as a panel, I'm doing a lot of talking, but I got to get this out. My belief is the oppressed, the underserved are not necessarily the people to drive that message home. It is the people with the privilege, the advantage. In other words, lastly, when I grew up, my parents raised me to say, not all white people are good. We lived in a suburb, 5 miles, a mile from where we moved. There, you're not to be caught across the county line after dark if you're Black. The property that my parents bought or had to buy through the broker said this land not to be sold to Negroes. It was a suburb. I was one of 8 Black folks in the school system, went through all of it. So very much suburban. But they would raise it, not all white people are good. And when this changes to a narrative of not all Black people, in the thought that my white classmates, their view was not all Black people are bad. You get it? Not all white people are good, not all Black people are bad. When that changes, we've made some progress. And I believe the voice to carry, when Sarah gets in trouble for acting like Chandra, speaking up, right? When Ryan is viewed as the angry white guy instead of Ian, that I mean, can you even begin to imagine? Sometimes I turn on the television and I just change the colors of the people, turn the sound off, the different shows, and people can't even
To jump in,
embrace and imagine
to
that. Go
jump in
ahead.
here, Nate. To jump in here, Nate, and kind of help you with the point. I think that what you're trying to say is that the systemic racism is the term is we're cutting off our nose to spite our
Absolutely.
face.
Absolutely.
So where we have resources that we should be using, intelligent Black women, the leaders of all the movements that are taking over the airwaves right now, from the Me Too movement to the Black Lives Matter movement, all movements started by African American women. There's a statistic that says a woman with a high school diploma will do better than a Black woman statistically with a master's degree. And so what we're talking about is a system that will cut off its nose to spite its face, take the best resource, and because of fear and because of other isms, not utilize that resource, and so it's to the detriment of us all. And another point that you're trying to make is for our friends that are on this panel that do agree with us, Ryan and Sarah, because of the work that they're doing, it's more than semantics, it's more than words, it's about being anti-racist. You literally have to go out and be anti-racist, not just against it. You actually have to get in the lane of changing things by applying energy and resources to help balance out the playing field, if you will. So what's happened in America is, another saying I like to use is the train has already left the station. To Ryan's point, when we were founded by families. And so we have some natural occurrences. When you're in a family, there are relationships and there's familiarity. And so what that does is it provides nepotism. And so when we have a country, the United States of America, that is actually the corporation of the United States of America, that's where you have nepotism and you pass the business through the family line. And so we're well aware of the natural state of things. And so we did have the Civil Rights Act of 1864 to try to balance out the business scales, because it's not in people's hearts to actually be fair. And I think where we are now in this world, and with this great forum that we have of conversations in crisis, we're all recognizing a worldwide crisis, a worldwide pain. And so spiritually, we're at a reckoning point, and all these things are surfacing. And that's why I think now is such a great time to have all of these conversations. Today, we'll have this great one about race, and there's much to be said about misogyny, a separate subject. And then there's ageism, right? And then, of course, there's sexism. And so we are a nation of isms. And until we heal and educate ourselves through conversations like this, and expose ourselves to things to help us grow, we're going to continue to run in place. So to your point, what we've done as a nation is we've cut up our nose to spite our face by not utilizing all the best resources that we have at hand.
Mm-hmm. Healing being a very, very good word for where it is we're trying to get to, because we are wounded, different than broken. One thing that you said about I'm reminded of Mother Teresa. She would never, she says, don't invite me to an anti-anything rally, but I'll go to a pro or for. So I believe it's going to take both in this regard: anti-racism, pro-equality. And it's going to take all of the voices to do that. It may, and maybe you helped kind of clarify that, it may be the oppressed and the underserved being anti-racism, and those that have the advantage being pro-equality to get us there. But it is not a single effort. We've raised our voices, we've walked, we've marched, we've fought, we've done, as a minority race, so many things and have gotten so far, although in the last 3 or 4 years, it seems like we've gone backwards. But I think moreover, it's been okay to be overtly racist. The folks that were feeling that way came out of the closet, and now we know. So in a way, it's a blessing in disguise because we may have become a little complacent around that.
Absolutely. So we have to give everyone a voice. And we were going to get back to Chandra, who had a thought, but
Oh,
little
yes, thank you,
Chandra
sorry.
sitting over there. You're so welcome.
It's fine. Because I'm laughing because it's like, you know, we march, it's a problem. We speak up, it's a problem. We create movements, it's an issue. And it's like, at what point, so are we supposed to go to status quo? Like, I get irritated because I get told, oh, you're not supposed to make that face. Oh, you're not supposed to feel that way. Or why do you feel like Black Lives Matter more than any? I'm like, it's not that. Like, you all, and I've worked in industries where they're predominantly white men, and I'm either looked at as a token or looked at as, you know, you got here because of affirmative action. And I'm like, ah. And so I just think that, like, I really want to talk. You said the thing about a white woman with a high school diploma and a Black woman with an election,
Masters.
a master's. No, I actually had a judge. They were running for county clerk here in Stafford County back in 2015, right? The woman that she was running against was a white lady who only had a high school diploma and one course at community college. The Black woman that was running was a judge. She was a federal, like, wasn't a regular, like, she was a judge. Like, literally, she had a law degree, she was a judge. And do you know, she did not win the election, and she was looked at, and you know, the only thing they could say was she was married to a white guy. Like, they totally dismissed her. They totally said she wasn't qualified because she's married to a white guy. Like, mind you, her resume spoke for itself.
Mm.
But yet, the voters chose this lovely woman who only had a high school diploma in one class in community college. That's a problem.
Yes, all too often.
And it hurt me because I talked to both of them. Both of them were nice people. But one was more qualified, but because of the perception, she had locks. You know, she was very Afrocentric. The Black people didn't want to vote for her because she was white, married to a white man. The white people didn't want to vote for her because she was a Black woman with locks, and she was very outspoken. So it's like, she's damned if she do, damned if she don't. Like, it was like, really. So now we're stuck in this antiquated system here where we have to go into the county clerk's office, and we have to be there by 3:30, and we don't have the lovely electronic nuances and the new stuff that makes life easier because we don't have someone qualified enough to understand it. Being a Black woman is hard. That's all I'm gonna say. Like, I just have to say it. Like, there's so many examples. I can go list after list after list. I had an intern get chosen for a position higher than mine, and she didn't even have. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
And I'm sure you
Interesting.
have many.
I was going to throw out too, like, we're kind of focused on employment opportunities, but that data point holds true across every major system. So, you know, white people are going to have better outcomes in the criminal justice system, in the Department of Children and Families, in the education system, in
Elections.
the healthcare system. You know, so that's data point. It's not like it's a one-off with resumes. A white woman with a high school diploma has better health outcomes, maternal morbidity, lower maternal morbidity rates or infant mortality than a Black woman with a PhD. And you know, that trend's going to hold across every system. And I think, you know, one of the issues is that we never look at the system as a whole. It's always like, okay, we're focused on job in this silo or that silo. And the reality is, it doesn't matter what industry or system that we're talking about. It's the trend, the data trend is exactly the same.
Sarah, I want you to speak to something. I want to change gears just a little bit here. Chandra, you mentioned Black Lives Matter, and we've heard the narrative. Why should Black Lives matter if they don't matter to themselves? The crime rate, Blacks are, you know, shooting themselves, and they're criminals, and all of the stereotypes that exist to a group of people who unfortunately have been oppressed for a very long period of time. And one of the theories around that is, when you have so much taken away from you, when you've been talked about, put down, and made to feel like nothing, and you go up for opportunities and they're just right before you, taken away, or you find yourself impoverished and in a system that locks you in, your value system changes. Those things you have pride in could become very small material things. It could be a matter of respect. That's all you have. You don't have lots of material possessions or jobs or things that give you self-worth, self-esteem. And so it's hard for, you can get to the point where an individual won't value life because they really have very little of value and they feel beaten down, oppressed. And I don't know if people understand that mindset, but there's this myth that, well, you don't appreciate yourself, you don't value yourselves, and you can just, lift yourself up and get out of that situation. Sarah, I know you spent, I think 10 years at one of Chicago's worst public housing projects, Cabrini Green. Can you demystify that myth a little bit, speak to your experience and the work that you did?
About a lot of things, but I think first and foremost, it is the focus that's a myth. People that in the housing project I worked in, of course, care about the outcomes of themselves and their children and are fighting every day. I think that's a conservative tagline that they're using Chicago and other inner cities as a punchline for just a false narrative. And to say, what about Chicago? What about the people killing each other in Chicago? People do care about that. It's two very separate issues that shouldn't, that don't really, it's two separate things to talk about. And if you go to Chicago, you'd see every day people from those communities fighting hard to better their own communities. And even in Delray Beach, we have the Walk Against Violence that happens every year. And there are organizers and advocates from community that are working on those things every day. They don't meet the headlines, and people don't care about that work that's being done until it helps prove a point when they're talking about the Black are trying to shut down the Black Lives Matter movement in some way. And I think secondarily, the same systemic racism that causes those problems, not the people that live there, the system creates those problems. And it's the same systems issue that makes you need a Black Lives Matter movement in the first place, So it's a complicated issue, and it's one that angers me every time they bring up Chicago, something that's kind of near and dear to me. I'm only grateful for everything I was given, and I think was given a lot more from the residents of Cabrini Green in Chicago than I ever left there. So it's a complicated issue, but two very different topics, I think, whether or not.
I would agree with Sarah. I think there are two very different topics. So when you discuss Black on Black crime, and then you start talking about the projects, that's going to the worst case scenario as far as Black in general. It's saying the people in the projects. I've had many conversations with white people, especially, who will say to me, just, trying to understand racism. They say, well, Sharifa, I don't understand the Black struggle. And I say, you know what? I don't necessarily understand the Black struggle. I was born in Washington, D.C. I left when I was 2 years old and moved to Columbus, Ohio. My home and the piece of land that I had in Columbus, Ohio, was larger than a California block. Okay, I was surrounded by trees. But we tend to assume because we're Black, we know about the projects. Because we're Black, we had to struggle, and that is a part of the problem. But let's go back to the Black on Black crime. We only call it Black on Black crime. We don't call any other race white on white crime. You know what they call it? They call it crime. There is crime everywhere. People kill who they know. They kill the people who are in their surroundings, who are around them. So even discussing Black on Black crime is feeding into the problem. It's separating us instead of focusing on what are the areas that we need to work on to make this world a better place. One of the things that Sarah mentioned is all the same things, and it's not. There are different levels to different things. When I ran for city council, my focus was on creating jobs. When I spoke at the panel a month ago, I had to answer the question, should I have focused on police brutality? Should I have focused on racism instead of focusing on jobs? And the answer that I gave myself, no. We have to be able to create resources and income for people of color in order for them to be able to sustain themselves, to get out of those projects. I was raised in the heart of South Central Los Angeles. During 1992, during the LA riots, I lived 2 blocks away from the intersection of Florence and Normandy, where they just tore up that intersection, beat Reginald Denny. I was 2 blocks away from that. That wasn't the projects. That wasn't the ghetto. I heard places that were over an hour away from that intersection being labeled South Central. So we try to label people in different areas in order to make them fit the narrative. So it's not just about Black on Black crime or even the projects. It's about how do we make this world a better place, a more equal place for everyone.
Absolutely. It's a convenient way to sweep it under the rug. There are far more trailer parks than there are ghettos.
I would say so where I live at, yes.
I mean, the statistics, there are far more poor white people than there are poor Black people. I mean, statistically here in the United States. So it's a nice way to, package it up and say, well, they don't care about them. So, for example, I just read yesterday where because George Floyd, because he had a criminal past, and he resisted arrest, he got what was coming to him. Now, I'm pretty sure that I think there's a constitution and there's some things that say, one individual cannot be the judge, the jury, and executioner. But what bothered me most about that is if that was a dog that the cop had put their knee on, there would be an uproar. Probably worse than what we just saw for George Floyd. Why is that? I don't get it. Well, I do. I understand why, and it's disheartening to hear these comments. What you just spoke to, Sharifa. There was a point in time. I mean, it goes back. There's intel. There's information that says when slavery ended, slave owners who lost their slaves got reparations. That was very interesting. Where Black people were given land and then it was taken away from them. Where there were Black communities, towns, and apparently similar to Black Wall Street, the Klansmen came in, took the land, and renamed it. And so you have today where you talk to a mortgage company and they say, "Can you get a loan for $50,000 from your family?" Which comes from generations of having that land and selling it. And are you kidding? Because I believe this generation is one of the first where they're going to be able to provide land, housing to their to the next generation. The point is, it's not for a lack of trying. It's not for a lack of desire. It's been in a system that has been very oppressive and with an unfair advantage. Now, some people say you're whining. Or my least favorite, most favorite, sarcastically speaking, I'm tired of this racism narrative. I'm tired of hearing about this. I'm tired of, all the fodder and George Floyd started a race war. Well, imagine how the people who are being discriminated against, who are experiencing racism since the day they were born feel. And they can't just simply turn off the TV or get off social media. And no, George Floyd did not start a race war. The race war was well underway.
Let me jump in here, Nate, to address something that we're talking about. Sarah made a good reference to, and if you notice, Sarah, the conversation just kind of floated back to economics and getting a job, and there are many different subjects that the isms can touch. Racism, for example, can touch, and we talked about the infant mortality rate of Black women. We've talked about the lack of education, the lack of opportunities, etc. The reason why it keeps coming back to economics is because of what Nate is trying to say. Family wealth, passing down your inheritances to the family, your businesses, boosting up the next generation, kind of takes a stress level off of earning, wondering how you're going to eat, and where you're going to get your next, how you're going to pay your rent. And with the majority of Americans, they say the average American wage yearly is like $40,000 a year. We all know that that's well below a living wage. You can't live off of $40,000 a year. And the overwhelming majority of people that make that wage will be people of color, and in the highest category, it'll be Black women in that range. So that's why it always comes back to economics, because the true way to balance things out is through economics. Long before the NAACP, one of the first movements on the East Coast was started by Marcus Garvey. It was the UNIA, the United Negro Improvement Agency. And he recognized that the way to gain respect and to gain footing was through economics. And he started businesses and spreading information about economic knowledge and the language of money and what that means. And to a lot of people's surprise, he was actually able to fund the first ship to take American people that wanted to go back to Africa. It was called the Black Star Line. And so these people were well aware of economics. They pooled their money, and those that wanted to go home went on the Black Star Line to Ghana, where they received an honorary citizenship. So we were well aware that economics is the way to balance things out, which is why it always goes back to money and opportunities. Martin Luther King was assassinated, and we're all well aware of that. What we're not aware of is the fact that he was assassinated because his next rally was going to be the Poor People's March. He talked about the two Americas, the rich America and the poor America. And that information is what got him assassinated. When you level out the playing field economically, you gain more advantages, it reduces the stress. All of those things are related, but it's not just about the money. And so we, once again, had to educate ourselves correctly on what to do with the money, because sure, we're very resourceful. People can be resourceful. Our communities are tight. We can pool our money, and we do. But if we're not focused on what to do with that money economically, i.e. buy back our neighborhoods, invest in a Black bank so that we can give opportunities to people that look like us, then we're going to squander the money and find ourselves in the same position. So even though it seems like it's a repetitive talk that we're always talking about money and equality, that's actually the advantage that we lack, and that we need to have more of. We don't have deep enough pockets, if you will, to continue to fund the underserved in all of the areas that you highlighted. If we could address the infant mortality rate with Black women financially, that would give us a better footing, because we all have the knowledge. We're all talking about the race war at Tulsa, Oklahoma, and how Donald Trump could have the nerve to do this. Well, Black people knew about Black Wall Street for centuries. We've known about that. Not all of us, but a large amount of us did know about that. And Black Wall Street is a testament to an economic ground where Black people, where the dollar took weeks to leave the environment. So that's why it kind of comes back to economics. Sarah, I just wanted to share that. And
I agree with you, Ian. I definitely agree with you. I'm cheering for you, clapping for you, holding my hands up, because that's what it comes down to. And again, everything you said, I co-sign. But one of the reasons why it comes back to economics that most people don't understand is it comes down to the 13th Amendment. If you've never seen the movie 13th, go watch it. It is on Netflix. So people always think the 13th Amendment freed the slaves. The 13th Amendment freed the slaves with one caveat: unless they were a prisoner. So what happened when the slaves were freed is they just literally made millions of people into prisoners. You're standing outside as a Black man, you're going to jail. You're loitering, you're walking too fast, you're driving as a Black man, you're going to prison. Because what people don't just look at that you went to prison, what happens when you come out? Now you've been labeled a criminal. Right? So now that you're a criminal, I can not only minimize you, but I can legally take away all your rights. I can take away your right to vote. So guess what? Now you have less Black people who are voting and making a change. And also, if I have to do what in that little checkbox, it's a little checkbox on every application that can change your life. Because now I have to say I'm a felon. right? Nobody cares what your story is. Nobody cared that this was a deliberate act to put you in jail to take away your rights. Again, watch 13. One of the things that it points out is that 1 in 17 white men are in prison. 1 in 3 Black men are in prison. So that's why it comes down to economics. When I take the head of the household, and in every culture, the man is the head of the household.
Yep.
But when I take the head of the household and lock him away, now the wife, the mother has to go get 3 jobs to be able to take care of the family because her husband is in prison. And so mom is gone, dad is gone. Who's minding the store? Who's raising the children? Who's home to tell little Johnny that you shouldn't, little Tyrone, that you shouldn't have Cheetos for dinner? Nobody is there. So you've ruined the family, right?
Yep.
And the man doesn't have the ability to go get a job when he comes home. He's been gone for 8 years, 10 years. He comes home. Now he got to rely on the missus because he can't get a job. What does that do to the family dynamic when she now becomes the head of the household? So it comes down to being able to do what God intended us to do and to be the provider, right? That's what the man is. In any culture, he is the protector and the provider. And when a man cannot provide for his family, you have just cut him off at the knees. And that's why it's about economic power and being able to provide for our families, for our children, and for our children and our community.
And I think circling back to what Nate had said earlier about, nobody wants to hear or white people, like, general, we don't know history, so that white people have been.
Sarah, I'm trying to hear this wonderful point.
Sarah, start over, please, Sarah. We kind of lost you.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I said, can you hear me now?
Yeah,
Yes.
much better.
I was saying, circling back to what Nate said about people, not wanting to hear about affirmative action or reparations. And I think in general, Americans don't know American history, the real American history, particularly white people. And they don't know that, white Americans have been receiving affirmative action for 400 years, through the policies of our country. And so it's like, needless to say, white women are actually the largest receivers of affirmative benefit, the most.
I lost her again.
Well, she's making great points, but we're
She
losing
is.
you.
We need to touch on that.
We lost you right. We lost you right at your last point, Sarah, when you were saying white women are the biggest benefactors,
Oh, they are.
beneficiaries. Are you there?
Their tears
Still,
move
still
mountains,
frozen,
honey.
Sarah. Wow.
But to piggyback on
Ryan.
that is, what you were saying, Ian, in regards to economics. So that's the good news, is that we know it's the economics that could be the biggest shifter, right, in this conversation. The bad news,
Correct.
The bad news is it's also the platform that's most protected by the system,
Right.
right, by primarily white people in power. It's the economics. It's the economics they care about, and unfortunately, they can't see that on the sideline is all of this potential, right? This intellectual potential, this emotional potential, the spiritual potential, right? That we just kicked to the sideline and we haven't put in the game. That in the end would help their would help everybody's economic, right? Position. They can't see that. They're so scared. They're so scared to give up, and they're looking for excuses not to accept it. Something recently that happened here in Delray Beach, and I would love for Sarah to chime in on this, was there was this Black Lives Matters, movement in Delray Beach, just like we're seeing all across the country. And then the mayor of DC does what they do and paints it right down on the street. And of course, the vice mayor of Delray Beach, my phone rings off the hook, right? With ideas. What can we do? What can we do to get behind this movement, right? Mm-hmm. And by the time I post this, the news comes out that Black Lives Matters, the organization is a Marxist organization. Mm-mm. And I got to tell you, this large group of people, primarily, 100% primarily, if that's a term, white people are like, ooh, I finally have an excuse not to get on board with this Black Lives Matters. Oh,
They
I
was
finally have an
looking for it.
excuse. Oh man, I was being so quiet for
Right.
weeks. I was being so quiet, right? Because the ones that were being loud, we know where they stand. We know them, right? But the majority were being so quiet, and they're like, oh, I got an excuse. Oh, I got it. It's a Marxist organization. That's why we shouldn't do it. That's why we shouldn't be about it. End of story. End of story. Let's stop talking about it. We're looking for that excuse. We always
Right.
are.
Right.
I
Right.
agree with you to a certain extent, Ryan. One of the things that happened ever since the George Floyd tragedy is that every white person I know picked up the phone and called me and either wanted to have a conversation or they wanted me to sit in the panel and discuss Black Lives Matter, discuss all our racial issues. And one of the things that they said was, Sharifa, I didn't know. I had no idea. And my question was, which part did you not know? Did you miss slavery? Did you miss racial injustice? Did you miss the civil rights movement? I just want to be clear on which part you didn't know so I can address it. So whether we look at the Black Lives Matter as angry Black lesbians, which some people do, because they're Black female lesbians who run a group, or some people look at them as Marxists, because if you go to their website, it does say that. That doesn't concern me. I'm speaking for the Sharifa, not for all the Black people in the world. Didn't concern me. It didn't bother me. What concerned me more than anything else is that people were sending money and just writing a check to Black Lives Matter, and they felt like this was going to end racism. Black Lives Matter is one organization. This is not the organization that's just going to save America. Some people have said they raised over $80 million. So I've heard numbers as high as $150 million. So my question is, if Black Lives Matter, is the money going to the Black lives that matter? That's my main primary focus. I was also asked, I'm sorry?
It has to be.
Yeah, and I was also asked the question from people on these panels, well, Sharifa, what can we do? And my thing is, I would prefer somebody to think in their mind what they feel their spirit, their soul calls them to do to make this world a better place than for Ryan to write a check for $5,000 to Black Lives Matter because that appeased something in his spirit. Because what has that really done for Ryan and for Ryan's community? But it does help this one organization. That's my primary view on it.
This money helps. Money isn't going to throwing money at this problem isn't going to solve it, in my opinion.
I mean, but
it helps and it goes a long way.
Depends where the money's going.
That is true.
Yes.
There's money needed to the points that are made in certain areas. It needs to be shifted there. Earlier, we talked about the economic imbalance. Completely agree with that. The statement that comes to mind is somebody in Germany said, America is starting to experience what Germany experienced a long time ago. 1/3 of you is willing to kill the other third of you while the other third looks the other way. And to me, more of the solution, whether it's through check writing and getting the economic balance where it needs to be, but it's also speaking up that third that's looking the other way because either they're uncomfortable or want to go back to something that I heard resonate. They're afraid. What are people afraid of if there's economic equality? I don't get that.
What
We
is
all
it you
benefit.
don't understand, Nate? If I have something and somebody else wants that thing, I will have to give up what I have in order to give it to them.
That's
So
not
it's
true.
a
There's
fear.
enough to go around.
Well, that's a fear-based thought process
Got it.
where people feel and they fear that it is not enough to go around. So, and in my experience from the stories that I've been told from people is exactly what we were saying earlier. The most racist stories I've heard of have come from the poorest people.
Mhm.
Because those poorest white people, let me be clear. And that is because a lot of those people feel if I have nothing else, I'm still a white person,
Right.
which makes me better than anyone of color. So they hold on to that because that may be the only thing they feel that
Mhm.
they have.
And I just to add to what Sharifa just said, I think we have a long history of doing that as a country, right? Of giving poor white people just a little bit more, dating all the way back to the 1600s and Bacon's Rebellion, because, and there's a million examples after that. Because if the most marginalized in our country actually came together, they'd be something to reckon with, right?
Right.
And so we've told this narrative so well for so long. You know, people now vote against their own self-interest because it's better to be poor and white than black in this country. And we've done such a good job of that narrative and you know, that divide and conquer strategy, because you know, there'd be real movement if we could get people to see their common interest in this country. And there's been times when that has happened, you know, and could happen again.
So
And then that's where you look at, can economics have an effect on politics?
Absolutely.
Because that's where money can really be utilized, is to shift the politics, because at the end of the day, the rich and white, they have the money, but they don't have the numbers. They don't have the numbers. They have to throw their arm around the poor white, or they have to throw their arm around white females, get them in with us, right? Keep our numbers up. But they don't have the numbers, right? And so they put in all these systems are in place in order to ensure that the people won't have those numbers, or the people are on the wrong side. And you find this, you're probably right in it, Sarah. You're in middle America, right? There's just probably tons of people.
There's a Trump sign every 7 feet. Yeah, that's exactly where I am.
Yeah. And there are those numbers, right? And they're totally bought in and on the wrong side, but they just don't see it. And the system has been doing that forever.
Yeah.
Back to economics, let's take, for example, Tyler Perry Studio, for lack of a better example, or Spike Lee, or other movie makers, Ava DuVernay, creating these films like 13th. Yeah, if you have money, now you can fund the information to change the narrative. There's a show called Man in High Castle. I saw on Prime. It talks about during the wars of the 40s, how propaganda controlled everyone's thoughts through the movies, the newsreels. They would demonstrate on the newsreels what they wanted people to feel, and it was such a commodity that these tapes of information were, you know, many lives were lost transporting these tapes of information to control thought. And so that's like another reason why economics is so important, so that we can use them in our corporate society.
When you look at movies like A Birth of a Nation that depicted African American men as rapists and
Right.
the aggressors, and that was the first time that the burning cross was ever shown, but it was really for cinematic purposes, right? So often we don't understand that this is a message that's being put out to showcase and display to the world who that artist or who that movie maker believes that we are.
Right.
So is this a matter of the underserved, disadvantaged, the poor getting played for money and power?
Absolutely.
I don't understand the question, really.
Right.
Because
So to hit it on the head, there was a few points made where it's better to be poor and white than black, and you may even extend that to be rich and black.
Mhm.
And what Ryan said about putting their arm around the poor, putting their arm around women. So are the marginalized, again, back to misogyny, women are looked down upon, and I believe the least respected, and it burns me up. I have a wife and 2 daughters. The least respected human on the face of this planet, or at least in the U.S., is the black female, and I've seen it too often in the corporate and everywhere, and you see it on TV, you see it everywhere. But to engage those that are somewhat disadvantaged, poor, underserved, to feed them, it's better for you to be against that group, even though it's not in their best interest, in order for the people that have the money to remain in power. I'm just trying to hit the nail on the head. Is that the issue?
Yeah, I think white women would rather buy into like the patriarchy to uphold their position at least as second in line, you know?
Right. But if you look at, like, in the South, there were whole movements of women, white women, who supported, well, they still do, the KKK and these organizations. That, like, it's amazing to see, like, even though they could be mistreated by the same group that they are, it makes no sense. but because they don't want to be put in the same category with the people who they want to oppress, it's like you would rather choose to be treated like shit by a white man, like that. That's your choice. Like look how many people voted for that thing we have in office right now. Like look at how many people in the southern states. Like I can only speak because I grew up in the South. It's like, why would you? How can you align yourself with that? But then I look at the experiences that I've had with white women. They would rather, cut off their nose to spite their face. And it's like, why would you want to, they'll say and they'll pull me to the side, I'm rooting for you. And we go to a meeting and it's throw me on, like, I don't understand it.
I think that people have different experiences. What I found from the white people that I've spoken to is that racism wasn't in their viewpoint. They didn't consider it. They didn't think about it. They were going through their experience, living their life. And it wasn't like they were comparing, saying my life is this, but the black, no, this is the experience. This is the life that they've had. And so now that it's more people are aware of a lot of the racial injustice, they're opening their eyes to the fact that their life, their experience, their situation may be drastically different than someone else. That's just been my experience.
It sounds like, and there's a reoccurring theme here, again, wounded, and on the individual level, because
Ryan, how you doing on time? You still there?
Ryan left us. I know he had had something to do at the bottom of the hour here, so I think he's gone. But I want to move to the next section, the last section here before we wrap up. And again, Ryan had another engagement he had to get to. Sorry, I didn't get a chance to say goodbye. I want to talk about solutions. But what I keep hearing in this common theme is healing is needed, and maybe even on the individual level. And it reminds me of a study that was done where they took 20 people and they put them in a room and they all were asked to rank how they feel like they're doing in life, right? And then they split the group in half. 10 people just were put to talk amongst themselves, and 10 people were sent to watch Jerry Springer episodes. And then they brought the group back together and they gave them that same survey. How do you feel like you're doing in life? The 10 people that just went to talk to themselves scored themselves the same. The 10 people who went to watch Jerry Springer all scored themselves higher. I'm doing better. and it having watched people that are doing worse than them, they felt better about themselves. And I'm hearing that theme. As long as I'm better than you, my life may suck, but as long as I find somebody that I can put beneath me, I'm feeling better about myself. I want to talk about solutions, but I'm wondering if the point of healing needs to happen on the individual level, where I don't need to feel better about myself by looking down on somebody. If there were no oppressed, if we all came together, and maybe that's euphoric or panacea thinking, but then maybe we could help each other in times where we may falter a little bit. But in any regard, that's just philosophical.
I think that's beautiful, Nate. I think that's wonderful. I think we can kumbaya all we want.
In this reality.
If you want to heal, cut me my check, give me the reparations, run me my money, and that's all I want to hear about. Because
love your directness.
it is what it is. Because right. People want to. I did a second panel that I'll talk about. They asked me to be on this panel about race relations. The night before, it was about 12 people on this panel. Oh, the night before the panel, you love my stories, huh, Chandra? The night before the panel, they sent me 20 questions. The first question on this list was, what can we do to help the African American community? Now, 1 out of 20 questions mentioned African American. No other question even mentioned the word African American. Mm-hmm. The other 19 questions had something to do with, well, how do we get along better? How do we show more love? How do we make this world a better place? And as soon as I got on the panel, I said, look, if you want to discuss race, if you want to have a conversation, have a conversation. But what I'm not going to do is sit here and waste my time, the little angry Black woman's time, kumbaya-ness and making everybody feel better. Mm-hmm. If you want to heal, if you want to make me feel better, run me my money. Cut me a check. The United States apologized for slavery in 2008. They did a written apology for slavery. Now, if you commit any crime in America, you have to pay restitution to either the victims or the families
family.
of the victim.
Mhm.
So America owes the African American people billions and trillions of dollars. So if you want me to heal, if you want me to feel better, I'm gonna need that check.
Mind you, I wasn't referring to the African American community in healing. I was referring to the people that are doing the oppressing. But I won't disagree with that point. I do believe that I've seen people with lots of money
Run me my money, Nate.
who were wounded and they
Wow,
caused
money.
damage. So I've got to stay true to my commitment to
But let me
healing
just ask
is
you
a
a
bigger
question,
part of it.
Nate.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to cut you off, but
No,
that's
no,
kind
that's
of what I
fine.
do because
Yeah.
we're getting to the heat of it.
Mhm.
Because in the meat of it, we're getting to the white meat, down to the problems. Because you said that these people may need healing, and it's the oppressed people.
Mhm.
To me, that just is kind of, and this is not about you, but so I guess maybe I'm not understanding the question. You want us to heal the oppressor?
No, I want the oppressed. The hardest thing to do is to face your own demons. I want every individual to look themselves in the mirror and identify what it is. What is the causation of them mistreating another human being? What is it that's in them that they have to deal with and reckon with? That being the
Okay.
first step. The second step then will probably cause them to want to make restitution, to want to treat people with equality. I'm just saying it begins there. The offshoot of that are a whole lot of good things, but that's
Right, I
the
hear
hardest
you.
thing to do. What I don't want to have happen is somebody to write a check, throw
Write a
it out
check.
there, and clear their conscience, and then continue with the same bad behavior, because we're going
But
to wind up back in the same place.
But it's not the same bad behavior because we are not our ancestors. We will never be slaves again.
Not
So
us, the check writers.
Okay, but the check writers are America, right?
Mhm.
The United States has paid restitution to the Japanese.
Everybody.
They have
Fair
paid
enough.
reparations they have paid it. So it's not something that they haven't done before.
Right.
But I just want to go back to something that I find very key and
Mhm.
very important. If we are going to take a look, we would have to take a look at people such as Ryan and Sarah and have this conversation with them. But these people are not the people who were doing the oppression. So
Agreed.
the reason it comes down to the check is because they still benefit. They still have an advantage because of nepotism and being able to pass along that money,
Mhm.
that check, through generation after generation after generation after generation. So the only thing that can come even close to being able to correct that is to be able to reduce the divide. And again, like Ian has so eloquently said so many times, is economics.
Mhm.
You have to be able to put us on a playing field that is almost, because we'll never get, all of that, but it brings us up a little bit to be able to take care of ourselves and to be able to provide for ourselves. I was on a panel and one of the gentlemen asked me, he said, Sharifa, he said, people have been given checks just like the Indians. And how do we know that if we give checks to the Black people, they're not just going to gamble it away or they're not going to get drunk or whatever? I said, this is the way I hear the question that you're asking me. If you came into my house and you killed my entire family, you even killed the dog, right? And I had $5 billion on the table, and you took all of that and took our family wealth, and then you come to me and you say, Sharifa, you know what? I think that the past needs to be forgotten. It needs to be forgiven. Kumbaya. I think we all need to get along. I know our ancestors, our people were wrong, but we need to put the past behind us. Okay, that's one thought, but that doesn't repair the damage that you've done. And that's what reparations means. That's the key root of it. It's Latin. It means to repair. So it's not about just the check. It's about you have to right the wrongs that you've done. And there's no other way, no other kumbaya way that's going to do that. You have to fix what you've done.
And again, I'm not arguing against anything. Underscore, exclamation point, everything you said.
Run me my money, Nate.
What I am saying is, and in my experience in life, money does not erase hatred. There's still that underlying problem. There are people that outright hate other people, economics aside. So it's a two-pronged approach, if we can at least agree on that.
Okay.
Make
You want me to agree?
amends, but
You want me
also
to agree?
you don't have to. But I'm just
No,
saying.
but I'm just going to try to agree with you, right? And based on your argument, and you're a black man, I love you to death. You was on my show. I love the way you coming from, but you have a more, people look at things different, right?
Agreed, absolutely.
If I have a clothing store on the left,
Mhm.
right, and it's a high-end clothing store, and I'm an African-American female going into that clothing store, and there's another store on the right, same high-end clothing or whatever, black woman going to the store, white woman going into that store. The white woman can look at me and say, "Ooh, I hate her. She's a Negro. I don't want her on this planet." But she doesn't have the ability to stop me from going to any store.
Mhm.
So because I now have control of my economics and my ability to buy and shop, to me, her opinion doesn't even matter.
Mhm.
Why? Because there's something in her that has hate. There's something that has
Agreed.
been brought down from generation to generation to
Yes.
generation
Right.
that has been instilled in her. I'm not going to use my time and energy trying to figure out how to get Karen to like me or want to be on her earth. What I don't want is her to stop me from having the ability to do whatever it is that I want to do. And the only way I can do that is to have economic power, because there's the key to economics is freedom, financial freedom, the freedom to go and do whatever it is that I want to do, and nobody can stop me. So I think it's wonderful if people love me. I want all the white people to love me and like me and think I'm a wonderful person. But at the end of the day, it's about my power and my ability to create jobs and to change my community through actual economics.
Yeah, and
Again,
I think there's two separate conversations. I was just going to say, there's individual hatred and bigotry, and then there's systemic racism. And the reality is you could round up every bigot left in America and put them on a rocket ship and send them to live on the moon, and our system would still
get made.
The system still produce the same outcomes, so it's more than like a, not feeling hatred, or, it's about putting people in a position of power where other people's hatred doesn't matter anymore. And I think white people have to learn that the systemic oppression of a group hurts all of us, right? So like you put the feelings aside on how people feel towards one another. It's great if everybody loved each other, but at the end of the day, even if people all did, our systems, that's so baked into who we are as a country and our systems as a country that it doesn't matter.
Yeah, maybe I'm not being clear. I'm not expecting everybody to love everybody. I don't expect everybody to love me.
I ain't gonna say all that now.
Right. I don't. It's a reality. What I'm driving at is I want people to at least, I don't want you to spend your time helping Karen get her. I want Karen to spend her time. I want people to love themselves to where they get to the point where if you love yourself, you're going to treat yourself a certain way. You can't love somebody else until you know how to love yourself. And if you don't love yourself, if you hate yourself, it's going to be much easier to hate and mistreat somebody else. So I'm trying to get to the root of the problem so we don't spread money around and economic around, and then we have another war going on where, that's all I'm just saying. I'm trying to say that there are two issues. Individuals who have an issue with hatred, bias, dislike, need to fix that within themselves. They have to do that work. That's their charge. That's their charge, their challenge. We as a nation, yes, there's some reparations, to use that word. There's something that needs to be done to fix a very broken, lopsided economic system that has oppressed a group of people for a very long period of time, and it's unequitable, and that continues on to perhaps two separate issues. I just want to put that out there.
So I'd like to jump in really quick and to this is for lack of a better way to say it, right? The micro and the macro. Of course, we talked about microaggressions before and what that term might mean, but when you use the term micro, it alludes to the macro. And so what we're saying right now is that individually, the ego can provide hate, right? So we have individuals that are battling with their egos and they have hate. and that's a microcosmic level. But what we're not addressing is the macrocosmic ego of the corporation of the United States of America. And so what that means is the first thing that we have to do, Nate, to your point, to heal, is the first thing that we need to do is recognize the sin, whatever the sin was. For some, they would acknowledge that it was the destruction of the native indigenous people. And then, of course, slavery on American soil and not paying reparations after the slaves were freed and not giving people a chance to compete in this economic race, yet another race. There's many different races, many different isms as well. So to your point, Nate, it's about, it's a spiritual reckoning. That's why we have this big bowl of soup of everything happening all at once, from the COVID, putting people back on their heels, quarantining us and getting us to have a good look at ourselves. We recognize that Black people are the microcosmic relative nature to oppression. And so that's why everything gets boiled into, at this point, for example, for lack of a better term, but the Black Lives Matter statement. Black people represent a lot of things that are just not wrong, not right in the world, all over the world, which is why it resonates all over the world. People in London, in Iran, Iraq, Syria, all over the world are resonating with Black Lives Matter because Black people are oppressed all over the globe. It's just what it is, and it's reinforced through the media, through marketing, and through the economic prowess of a very small few. So the first thing, and I understand why Sarah, is cautioned a little bit about economics and economic talk, because you see people get a bunch of money and then they go out and they spend it on things that don't have any value, right? Liabilities over assets instead of assets over liabilities. And so you find yourself in the same hole. So to your point too, Sarah, it's a spiritual foundation that America needs to reckon themselves with. Hence, our leader, Donald Trump, who has always been about the economy and economics. I grew up with Donald Trump, meaning as a media person. He's been on every talk show from Donahue to Oprah, and everyone has asked him forever to be the president. Why? Because of his economic prowess and the way that he appears to have it all figured out because of economics. And so America needs to recognize that we're in a spiritual reckoning, because that which we focused on the most is now leading us. And now we're kind of embarrassed that he's not eloquent, that he's a bull in a china shop, but he actually represents a large group of American people and the majority of the American corporation that actually put him in power. So it's a spiritual reckoning, and we're not responsible for everybody's spirituality. You know what I mean, Nate? Like, people have to find their own source and their own way to God. And it's not my problem if someone is racist. Like our co-host suggested, like, I don't care if you're racist. I don't care what you think about me. Just get out of my way before I go into the store so that I can, do what I got to do. That's not my problem. So it's a spiritual crisis that the country is going through. Hence this big bowl of soup.
And I'll just add, like, when you're saying it's not your problem, it's my problem as a fellow white American, right? That's my job to go.
Right.
And said earlier about like organizing in white communities. It's my job to go sort that through with people, right, and help people better understand our history and the challenges and their stake in the game at the same time.
Yeah, I may have my minister hat on more than my the other hat. I'm looking at where people are going to spend the next life. We're here for a very short period of time, and unfortunately, I grew up with.
What Chandra got to say?
Well, I'll say this, and Chandra, I'm going to come right back to you. I grew up with money. My dad was a multimillionaire twice over, and I've seen it create problems. I've seen it create more problems than it solved. So hence I don't believe it's the solve be all end all. So that's my It's
I don't
Nate's
think it's the,
perspective. It doesn't mean it's the
we
right
go,
perspective.
we gonna let Chandra Fender, and I just want to be clear, Nate.
Yeah.
Again, I don't believe that it's the end all. I have built businesses. I spent the last 26 years making millionaires. This is the first time that I'm working on my millions. I was one of the people who built cheaptickets.com, worked for AmericanExpress.com, did an IPO in 2016 to 2018, took a company public and raised $6 million. I understand the mindset and the mentality of a millionaire. And I agree with you 100%. It doesn't solve all problems, but it doesn't mean that we're not entitled to it. That's my argument.
And I'm not disagreeing. I'm
Right.
just looking at both sides of the coin. Go ahead, Chandra.
I'm just saying, like you said, like I just need clarification because I think we in them last days that our elders was talking about years ago. This is our last day because first of all, I grew up in the era where Donald Trump was the epitome of wealth and opulence, but on the flip side, my dad basically broke it down to me and said he is the worst businessman ever because he gives the illusion of doing things, but people are so starstruck. And so in the Bible, and I think it's in the book of Revelations, because I grew up in the church, and it says the stars will fall, right? So at one point in time, I thought that meant the stars, these celebrities and stuff will start dying. No, I think it's right now, it's the time where the whole celebrity star worship is now, the veil has been pulled back, and now I don't go to church. I'm bedside Baptist all day. But at the same time, I can't get away from my church roots and understanding that there are certain things in the Bible that, make sense now because now people are seeing that the illusion of what we have in office is now is true. These are the things that we have to be mindful of. Like we worship the illusion that this person created. Now we realize he's not that bright.
You can't possibly have a faith and support that.
They're really, really good
character.
people. Is what he said. That's what he said. People have died that have never died before. Like all of these things that have come out of that whole thing. Like we have to understand. Like anybody who sides and says bigots and racists are really, really good people. There's no way that you tear gas people to go snap a picture holding a Bible upside down. Like something. We have to look at where the messages and all this stuff is coming from and understand as a country, we have to do better and understand that this was bound to happen. And I'm glad it's been as peaceful as it has been because it could have been worse. Like back in the day, people were cracking heads and burning people alive and actually kidnapping people and killing people in the middle of the night all because they wanted to ride the bus. Like they wanted to cast a vote. Like they're claiming, like, I just think that we need to recognize that it's peaceful and things can change. We just have to be open to the change.
There's a saying when I lived in the Midwest up north, you can live next to me, just don't get ahead of me. But in the South, it's you can get ahead of me, just don't live next to me. Yeah, so there's still this ingrained thing. And so, Sharifa, to your point, let me tell you, if they begin handing out reparations checks, I'm going to be in front of the line. I will be there.
Behind me.
I won't. No. We're going to arm wrestle. Yes, you're right. You're right. My mom raised a gentleman. Ladies first. I'll be behind you. But let me
somebody
tell you
send me my check.
What I'm going to do with my check is I'm going to open up a center for healing.
Yes.
And help people to heal.
Yes.
So that's all I'm saying. And if it happens in that order, I'm all for it. I believe both need to happen. There's just so much, for me, there's so much pain and suffering. And I'm not dismissing money. That the power structure will actually change things. When it's no longer asking for a seat at someone else's table, but it's your table.
Amen.
When there's more than a handful of Black CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, when those discussions are no longer being had and it's an equal playing field, yes, a lot of this will go away, right? And I think people will recognize. So that will drive us a long way. I'm just addressing the root cause, and that's a bigger issue, and it's a much longer issue. Go ahead, Ian.
Yeah, and back to solutions as a way to get us there, right? Because to be honest, I think that if we would like to have a talk about reparations, that might even be a whole nother podcast. Because the truth is, and to Sarah's point, reparations are outlined in our policy. It's just that we don't have the information, right? That's why it's so important to share the right information, hence the language of money. You got to know the jargon to know what money is about. So there are many systems that are in place already that we're already paying for, that we should be using, that are in the form of a repair, if you will, but we just don't have that information. So to the point of this panel, hopefully, and with this talk, because I'd hate to leave it with, reparations, because I'm not really sure where my faith lies when it comes to reparations, because you guys might know history. The banks where the initial reparations were stored got robbed like 2 years after they established it. So that's another thing that America needs to reckon with. They agreed to reparations. They set up a bank. They put deeds. Every slave that got freed got a deed to 40 acres and a mule, in addition to his free papers. And all of those deeds went into a particular bank somewhere out in Wisconsin, I believe, and it got robbed, right? And so after it got robbed, it never got replenished. So when we talk about reparations and we talk about the fact that America knows it, yeah, they actually do know it. They did get started with it. They set the foundation up for it. The bank got robbed and it never got readdressed. It never got recommissioned. So the idea of reparations, 40 acres and a mule, can it be equated to today's society? Absolutely. It can be equated to today's society in the form of a check. And the problem that we're talking about is putting money into the hands of things that won't go anywhere, right? Throwing good money after bad. So we want to make sure that education has to be the key component. So for a solution, for example, via these podcasts, these shows, the focus is to share information, how to get your hands on all the information to help a Black woman start her own business. Sure, there's a lot of paperwork and sure, there's a lot of bureaucracy, but that sucks for everybody that steps out to go and get this started. But we just need to recognize the information that's out there, share the information, keep sharing the information, say it over and over and over again about what these resources are that are out there and are in place. We forget, right now we're in COVID, so we can't go anywhere, but they call it the public library for a reason. It's free, right? You can get a library card and you can go to the library and you can read and you can get information. So there are resources that are out there, and for a nice quick route or to get going now, it's really about gathering through forums like this, gathering those the right information and sharing those resources, i.e. back to Thrive. Thrive is a resource in Delray Beach for an underserved community. And a lot of people don't know about Thrive. So it's about are doing the work, getting the sound bites that they need so that people can actually utilize them and get in the game.
Love that. Reparations with financial literacy. 1 second, please. Education with financial literacy, mandatory. I'm sorry, reparations with financial education and literacy, mandatory. That's a great solution. Since you kicked us off in solution, I'm going to go to you. This is the last question. Please make your point, Sharifa, and then provide your closing thoughts on solutions.
Okay, I just want to thank you for that. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for being on the show. Believe it or not, this is my favorite conversation. This is my favorite topic. I love to discuss religion, politics, and racism, which is why I host the show, Face to Face Talk Show, where I sit down with my co-host, Paul Foss. Chandra's been on the show several times, and we discuss race relations in America. Paul is Jewish and in New York City. His experience is different than mine. So I love to have conversations where we can bring each other together. So it is important to me. I don't want anyone to get the image or the idea that my focus is on money. I just like to continue to bring up that conversation because people tend, in my belief, to kind of go after the warm and fuzzy, the feelings. How do you feel? And I'm like, I feel a lot better with $5 billion in my bank account. But I just like to remind them that it's not just about the feeling, it's about, okay. And then real quick, just to end it, that's so important to me, not only because of race. I remember doing a radio show with a dear friend of mine who's also a shaman, and we were talking, and I think I was in a mood that day, and I said, I have all my friends are psychics and tarot readers and healers. And they keep telling me, like, Sharifa, one day you're going to be as big as the Dalai Lama. Like, you're going to fill stadiums and the Hollywood Bowl and different things like that. And I said, but I just feel like, it's a lot of responsibility, all this money and all this fame. And she said to me, she said, Sharifa, but just think about what good you can do with that money. She said you can create farms and you can hire people and she named so many different things. And from that moment on, my whole mentality, my whole mindset changed because I realized and I understand what good I can do with that money. And so that's why I always put it at the forefront. And I think, Nate, you brought it home because you said you've been through these challenges with your father and him being a millionaire. But if you had the money, you already know what good you would do with that money. And to me, that's the focus. That's what's important. I think if Ian had a check, he'd do something good for it, with it. I think if Chandra had a check, she would do something good with it. So I don't even think about or consider, Nate might go and get drunk for 5 months because he had a check. That would never cross my mind.
Right.
We can do so much more good with money than without it. It's not the love of money that is the root of all. It's not money that's the root of all evil. It's the love of money.
Yes.
We are still entitled to have our situation repaired, not by white people, but by the United States of America. And I always make that distinction. That's why I built my first website in 1994, not because I was a Black woman, but I knew then that business, entrepreneurship, and the internet would allow me to have financial freedom. And that's what I want for everyone, Black, white, green, purple, it doesn't matter, for you to have financial freedom to be able to make a difference in your life, a difference in your legacy, and a difference in the world. So that's my primary focus.
And know that in confession time, that my positions are not about you. They're about me. Based on the damage that I saw money did, the love of money did growing up, I told my wife when we first got married, if money ever comes between us, I'm selling everything and burning all the rest. And that then became a self-fulfilling prophecy, how I was on the verge of becoming a multimillionaire 3 times, and 3 times started over from zero, scratch, nothing. One was a pre.com. So I get that experience. You are on this show because you are a mover and a shaker and an influencer and a powerful voice and a powerful, very intelligent, brilliant Black woman who has had success, knows what it is, and are making an indelible mark on this world. So the conversation around money has everything to do with me and nothing to do with you. Please. That's how I
run me my money.
Don't feel like you're on the defense there. It's my issue, literally. And I thank God she stuck with me this long, but it's my disdain for it. But you're absolutely right. It's the love of and the things that we will do with it. And I'm now shifting my focus. I want as much as I can get my hands on, so I can determine where that goes and who that helps. I don't need to leave with it, right? I'm leaving here the way I came, naked and with nothing. But so thank you. One of the last thing, where can people find you, hear about your show, hear more about you, and follow you?
AskSharifa.com.
Awesome. I
Love it.
Urge you all to go check her out. She is awesome. I was honored to be a guest on her show, and even more honored to have her on mine. She's a powerhouse and a very brilliant woman, as we have witnessed. Chandra, solution.
Yes.
Last and closing words.
Open and honest communication is a great solution. People being honest with themselves and others, and being open-minded. I think that would be a great solution, and that we can face whatever hangups they have with other people, and also vote. My biggest thing is vote. I mean, I think that will change everyone. Vote. Period. Exercise your right. People died for you to be able to vote. So that is my biggest push, and those are my closing remarks. I mean, it's short and sweet.
Did you get the T-shirt we talked about on the last?
I haven't yet.
Oh, okay. What was the saying again?
Vote. There's a vote. Just vote, right?
Just vote. I think it was.
I mean, yeah, because I have a couple of them. Don't try me, try Jesus. That was months ago, and I got another vote. I got to go look at what I submitted to her. But yeah,
For those of you who don't know, Chandra is a very strong advocate for voting. And basically, if you don't vote, go somewhere and sit down and shut up.
Thank you. Don't say nothing.
Which we all appreciate. We all very much appreciate. Chandra is Sharifa's the yin and yang. I just thoroughly enjoy being on the show with you. Two are just amazing, and I hope to be able to repeat that again if at some point. Where can they find you and more about you, Chandra?
You can find me on all things social media, Chandra Gore Consulting on Facebook and Chandra Gore Consulting on my website, and also C Gore Consults on Instagram. So yeah, that's it pretty much.
Again, I invite you to follow and check her out. She is just another amazing soul. I greatly appreciate you being here. Last and certainly not least, Sarah, closing comments on Solution. And
so I think Solution, always caveat with, keep learning and organizing, because there's a lot of bad comes from good intentions. And this is a big problem that deserves big respect. So I think, especially for white people who are just learning about this and then saying like, well, what can we do? My advice first is to keep learning. And then I'll tell you what we are doing at Thrive. Thrive is a community asset development firm, and we strongly believe that marginalized communities have solutions for their own problems, visions for their own futures, but don't have access to the infrastructure and the resources that they need to get that work done on their own. And so Kristen and I, my partner Kristen and I, both consider ourselves community organizers. We just organize in different communities. She is primarily doing the organizing in Black communities, to put together community-driven plans and community-based solutions. And I do the organizing in white advantaged communities to teach white people about their advantage and how they can share that advantage, right? And so we laugh a lot that we're, trying to combine Black power with white advantage and see what will come out of that. And so it's a lot of unlikely allyship, right? Of like bringing resources to communities to solve their own problems, because we strongly believe that can be done. We also have recently launched racial equity funds in Delray, and there's one coming online in Chicago and another coming. They're kind of coming across cities through partnerships with the Racial Equity Institute and Building Wealth in Communities. And that fund will support home ownership, like down payment assistance, and patient capital loans to minority-owned businesses. So zero interest patient capital lending to minority and women-owned businesses. Because I think a lot what Sharifa talked about it, right? Like once those businesses have what they need to grow and build, they're going to pull up people behind them too. And that's an important part of this process. So that's a lot to say. This is all very complicated. And I think everybody has to keep studying, keep learning, and start doing once they've paid enough homage and respect, I think, to the problem. So that's what we're doing at Thrive, working on at Thrive. And we'd love to get connected with anybody who's interested. You can reach us where our website is thrivedelraybeach.com. You can also find us on Facebook at Thrive Delray, and on Instagram, or obviously get in touch with either Kristen Cox or myself.
Awesome. We appreciate your efforts towards trying to equalize things. I mean, from the time you spent at Cabrini Green 10 years and what you're doing at Thrive. And I heard a breakup when you said the address to reach you and get more information on Thrive. So if you just could say it one more time, where can listeners find out more about Thrive?
ThriveDelrayBeach.com.
Perfect.
Or at Thrive Delray on all the social media platforms.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you. Ian, any final thoughts?
Final thoughts. Chandra, Sharifa, and Sarah, thank you so much for your amazing insight and for having time to be on our show. Big shout out to my boy, Ryan. Thank you so much for stopping by, Ryan. Your input was very valuable. And I really appreciate it. And I know that Nate does as well. And final thought, to what everyone has been saying, it's really about getting the information and education. And when I say education, I really don't mean it by the nominal form. I'm not talking about a degree. You might want to call it street smart. You might want to call it just knowing the way of things, or just knowing the way of the world. Educate yourself, whatever it is. There are books on every subject. There are audio books on every subject. Ignorance, they say ignorance is bliss. And none of us want to walk around, like the fool. So educate yourself and find the resources that are available. Let's put them into place and share the information. Educate yourself and share the information.
Awesome. Well, in closing out this podcast recording or Zoom recording for Conversations on Crisis, again, I want to once again thank you, Chandra. Thank you, Sharifa. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Ryan, when you watch this. And, of course, my co-host, Ian, brother from another mother. I thank you all for your thoughts, your insights, your candor, your transparency, your directness on a very important dialogue and conversation. True to my form, I'm really about, again, my mission statement, encouraging others to endure through crisis while inspiring them to live up to their fullest potential. So hopefully you've heard something today that would make you think, that would challenge perhaps a thought that needs to be challenged, to open your minds and open your hearts, to elevate yourself, beginning with yourself, and then you're able to go out and be a change agent in the world. As we are speaking with change agents, we're making a difference. As you always hear me say, until next time, thank you for joining us. Live your best life on purpose now. I hope that you were able to find some nuggets of wisdom, some inspiration, and something to help you in your life's journey as you progress towards living your best life. If you enjoyed what you heard today or were helped in some way, please send me a message. Send me an email, drop me a line. I'd love to hear from you. I love hearing how this content is helping individuals in their daily lives. For more information, content, videos, and information on my book, and links to all my social media, please visit natebattle.com. Remember, today is the youngest you'll ever be, so go out and make the most of it. As always, thank you for listening. Thank you for your time. Live your best life on purpose now.